LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to this special LiberalViewer media mix-up. Trump charged with 34 felonies in New York. I will be using my background as a criminal defense attorney to analyze this historic arraignment of Donald Trump yesterday, and I'll be showing 11 clips along the way, mostly from Fox News to show their biased coverage of everything, pretty much. But I'll also have some commentary that I'm going to be adding to MSNBC clips and one CNN clip. Along the way, I'll show you Fox News hack legal analyst Jonathan Turley misstating the law, as I have for weeks, I guess, been showing him doing that. And I'm going to give you my own theory or an additional theory why the statute of limitations is not a problem in this case. It's my, like I said, my own analysis that I haven't seen on the cable news anywhere. And you can see a summary of all the stuff I'm going to talk about down in the video description. There's a list of all the clips, and then in between the clips, there's like a number and a letter for all the still images I'm going to show you. And down below that in the sources, you can see where I'm getting everything I'm showing you. And I do want to start with political comedy as usual. And so for political comedy, I'm going to show you one of the two MSNBC clips. This is Rachel Maddow self-admitting that she's acting like an eight-year-old when she avoids naming a certain publisher of the National Enquirer who's a witness in the felony case against Donald Trump in New York that I will talk about a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
The prosecutor had three big posters behind him at his press conference today, laying it all out in hard-to-miss terms in case you are a pictorial learner. This is one of those three posters, and you can see the headline there at the top, Catch and Kill Scheme to Influence the 2016 Election. And as it shows in very simple terms, the allegation from the prosecutors here is that this catch and kill scheme was hatched in August 2015 at a meeting at Trump Tower. You'll remember that Trump announced his candidacy for president in June 2015. A few weeks later, in August 2015, according to prosecutors, he met at Trump Tower with Michael Cohen, his lawyer, and the embarrassingly named David Pecker, the head of a company that owns the National Enquirer supermarket tabloid. Because I'm 8 years old, I can't say Pecker without laughing, and so I have to come up with weird euphemisms and sentence structure to avoid saying it more than once.
It's an objectively funny name.
It's an amazing part of the story.
I apologize. I should be bigger than this. I just turned 50, and I can't get through a sentence with the word Pecker in it without turning this color. Anyway, at this meeting in August 2015, the National Enquirer guy, as we'll call him, agreed to help with Trump's campaign, saying that he would act as eyes and ears for the campaign by looking out for
the National Enquirer guy, because Rachel Maddow apparently has problems saying the name David Pecker. And one of the things I was wondering when I watched that clip was, like, were all the other panelists like suppressing some joke about Rachel Maddow's LGBT status and somehow her aversion to the name David Pecker, or I don't know. You can, I guess, down in the comment section, you can insert your own like joke that will get you canceled here. Maybe, I don't know. You can. Was that going on in the background there? Am I crazy about that? That's my one commentary on that clip. But I do appreciate the graphic that they showed from Alvin Bragg's press conference there. I don't know if you can see. This is the catch and kill scheme to influence the 2016 election. A scheme is sometimes called a conspiracy. The scheme is the plan of a conspiracy, and I'll be talking more about conspiracies later when I give you my special theory on why the statute of limitations might not have run. But you can see that after the primary witnesses, Michael Cohen, Alan Weisselberg, Donald Trump, and David Pecker met in Trump Tower in August 2015. They worked on these three different cases. One was the Stormy Daniels hush money payment. The other is Playboy playmate Karen McDougal, and then the third one is this Trump Tower doorman who apparently had a story that wasn't even true, that Trump had fathered an illegitimate child, and they paid him $30,000. And you can see in this chart that there were 11 falsified invoices, 12 falsified general ledger entries, and then 11 false recording of the hush money repayments as a retainer. And if you add 11, 12, and 11, that's how you get your 34 felonies. Now, all of the felonies are this law, this first degree business falsification or business record falsification law I've been showing you in my Monday media mix-up for the last couple weeks. If you look at the indictment, and I put a link down to the indictment in the video description, all 34 counts look kind of like these first two here, which is a count of falsifying business records in the first degree. The defendant made a false business record. And this, here in count one, it's an invoice by Michael Cohen. And in this second one, it's an entry in the business records of the detailed general ledger for the Donald J. Trump Revocable Trust. And you see that it's a commission, or it's the creation of a false business record with intent to defraud and intent to commit another crime and aid and conceal the commission thereof. So it's to aid and conceal another crime. That's what makes it a felony. Now, that crime doesn't have to be a felony. It can be another misdemeanor, because crime is specifically defined in the New York Criminal Code. Here you can see in section 10 of the Penal Code, a crime means a misdemeanor or a felony. That's important to remember when we get to Jonathan Turley misstating the law. But what is that other crime that the business record was falsified to conceal or aid? Well, one of the crimes, if you've been watching my Monday Media Mix-Up for the last couple weeks, you know that Michael Cohen pled guilty to campaign finance crimes, and he did it at the direction of Donald Trump. If you've been watching the last couple of weeks, you've seen this is count 7 of what Michael Cohen pled guilty to in August 2018, where he paid $150,000 with the CEO of a media company, that's David Pecker, to Karen McDougal to keep her, and for the principal purpose of influencing an election. And then count 8, that's the Stormy Daniels payment of $130,000. And again, I have highlighted direction of that same candidate. And in fact, if you go look at the statement of facts that Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan DA, gave out, I put a link down to the whole statement of facts in the video description. You'll see that Alvin Bragg actually quoted the things I've been showing you the last couple weeks. The two on August 21st, 2018, lawyer A, Michael Cohen, pled to the felony, and he has in bold, in coordination with and the direction of a candidate for federal office. That's Donald Trump. And he has those 2 felony federal counts listed here in the statement of facts. So that is one of the crimes that these payments were meant to conceal, these false business records were meant to conceal. And one of the reasons it's important is that the direction of Donald Trump is under federal law. I've shown you this before. 18 U.S.C. Section 2, if you direct someone to commit a federal felony, you have committed that federal felony. But we have actually found a new law, a misdemeanor New York law, that was also being concealed by these false business records. One that I hadn't looked at, I haven't talked about, I hadn't heard of until Alvin Bragg talked about it at his news conference after the arraignment of Donald Trump. And that is this law right here. I put a link down to it in the video description. It's New York Consolidated Law, Election Law, Section 17-152, Conspiracy to Promote or Prevent Election. And you can see here, any 2 or more persons who conspire to promote or prevent the election of any person to a public office by unlawful means, and which conspiracy is acted upon by one or more of the parties thereto shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. So it is actually, and so if you use illegal things like a false business record, uh, or there are various other illegal acts that are mentioned, and I'll show you Alvin Bragg explaining those in a few when I get to that clip in a few minutes. But that's a New York election law, a misdemeanor. But the thing is, it's a felony to create a false business record, even to cover up a misdemeanor, because covering up a crime it even is worse than the crime itself. They always say the cover-up's worse than the crime, and that's true in the New York law that I was showing you earlier, that this is the falsification of business records in the first degree. It's if you do it with the intent to commit another crime or to aid or conceal the commission thereof, that makes it a Class E felony. So we know that there is this New York misdemeanor that this conspiracy was trying to cover up, the misdemeanor of a conspiracy to promote someone for election in New York through illegal acts, and that qualifies. But I'm about to show you this clip of Jonathan Turley misstating the law, where you'll see the host of the program, Jillian Turner, actually ask Jonathan Turley, what does it have to be a felony? And no, it doesn't. It can be a misdemeanor that you're covering up. But Jonathan Turley gets it totally wrong over in this clip.
But talk to us about reporting today confirmed to Fox News that there are more than 30 charges. One of those is a felony.
Well, one very likely has to be a felony. If they're going to use this bootstrap argument of the New York misdemeanor, they have to bring that misdemeanor back to life, and the only way to do it is to say it was committed to hide a felony. So that would be part of that theory. Look, we've all known the most obvious fact that history is being made. The question we're going to learn in the next few minutes is what type of history. Is it good or bad history? Many of us have no objection to a former president being indicted. That can be a vindication of the rule of law. It can also be the degradation of the rule of law.
Degradation? Degradation, is that even a word? It almost sounds like a made-up word that Tom and Greg would use on the show Succession. Degradation. I don't think that's a word. But also, you just saw Jonathan Turley say that the New York crime of first-degree falsification of business records requires you to aid or conceal a felony. No, it just has to be any other crime. So that was wrong, because it could actually be this election law crime. And that's just a misdemeanor, but covering up that misdemeanor is a felony. And as long as I'm showing Fox News bias here, I have a few more clips of Fox News bias when we're waiting for Trump to show up for the arraignment. Like, Trump showed up late for court. And, when I was a public defender, when my client showed up late for court, a lot of the judges, like, if you weren't there at 2:15 on the dot, you got a bench warrant, or you had to wait till the end. And I don't know, maybe he made special arrangements, but again, he was not treated like every other defendant. He did get some special treatment. And he certainly got special treatment on Fox News. Brian Yennis, who I've shown reporting on this case several times on my Monday Media Mix-Ups, here he starts to talk about other New York cases that Donald Trump is facing, the one from the Attorney General of New York, Letitia James, and then the E. Jean Carroll case, where that's a defamation case where E. Jean Carroll claims that she was raped by Trump in a New York department store, and then Trump called her a liar, and that's the defamation that E. Jean Carroll is saying that she was defamed when Trump called her a liar for saying the true thing, that she was raped by Trump. And the word rape does not, the way Brian Yennis gets around saying rape in this clip is, and an example of Fox News bias, in my opinion. You can let me know what you think after we watch that short clip together over here.
I will say, just on a point that Martha and I believe Brett were talking about, it's not just this is the only criminal matter he's facing here in New York, but he is facing an affront in two civil matters. The New York State Attorney General, Letitia James, is going after Trump for in a $250 million lawsuit for defrauding lenders and others. And there's also a defamation case that's set to be heard in April that's set to be held in April here in New York. Somebody accusing him of battery and whatnot. So this is on multiple fronts here in New York. This is the only criminal matter, but yeah, he's got some issues here. John, go back. We'll go back to you. Go ahead.
Battery and whatnot. Battery and whatnot. That's like the strangest description of rape I've ever heard. Battery and whatnot. So yeah, I had to show that one. And then these next two clips I have this theory, having unfortunately watched hours of Fox News coverage of this before Trump showed up, and like all morning they were saying Trump loves the cameras. He's gonna come and make a statement on his way in or his way out. We're waiting for him to come through those doors and talk to the cameras. And they were told, sometimes they said we're told he's going to make a statement. And based on these next two clips, I think that the Fox News people may have even had his talking points, because here you'll see that they kind of give the talking points he was going to give if he made it to the camera. I don't think Trump was doing very well yesterday, and I'll talk about that more when I show a brief clip of his speech from Mar-a-Lago. But here first you see John Roberts talking about how, we're expecting him to come to the cameras, and this is really a kickoff. It's the kickoff for his campaign, and it's like all this weird happy talk for the Trump campaign that I will talk about a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Expect that the president is going to walk through those doors and walk up to the camera and make a comment. Could this be the beginning of a reboot of his campaign?
It could be. I think, as Brett noted earlier in the day, when the president announced his campaign to run again in 2024, it didn't get a whole lot of hoopla. It was fairly quiet. And this has clearly created a lot of drama and a lot of attention around the former president. He has said it is not this form of attention that he wanted. He thinks this is very sad, what is happening here. I would just point out or reiterate, I guess, that, this is very unusual. That we don't do this here in the United States. I was just looking at information on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who came back to office with an indictment hanging over his head. That's generally not the way that we do things here in the United States. But that precedent has now been broken with this case, John. And we'll see if we hear from the former president here. He doesn't like to walk by cameras and not say something. So we'll see if he's in that mood today. But we do expect this is going to get underway very shortly, John.
So yeah, they kind of previewed what Trump's talking points would be when they expected him to come to the camera. But when he actually came into court, he just darted right on by there. And then Martha MacCallum, based on the look on his face, gave all of his talking points. That was the weird part. And also, we know how he feels. He's been through so much today. He was fingerprinted, booked, processed. Well, booked and processed, that's kind of the same thing. And really all he had to do was get fingerprinted. They didn't do the mug shot. They didn't handcuff him. There's no perp walk. So I don't know what the big indignity was, but she plays up the indignity. And then based on the look on his face, she could tell he was very serious and very well. I guess I'm pre-criticizing the clip, but I'll talk about it a little more after we watch that together over here.
Wouldn't prosecute. Here comes the former president. Let's just listen into this.
President Trump, will you come speak to us, President Trump?
Oh, that was just wow. And he went right into the courtroom. We thought that he was going to come up to that camera, but change of plans to what we had been advised. And he just walked straight in there. So again, we are told that there is a still photographer who is in the courtroom who will be allowed to publish one photograph of the president there before the judge, Juan Merchan. And we will not see anything live from inside the courtroom. It is state court, and typically cameras are allowed in state court, but the Trump legal team made a request to the court that live cameras not be allowed to cover the proceeding because it would create a circus-like environment. Let me bring Martha in on this because, Martha, you and Brad are very astute politically. You would think on the one hand that former President Trump, who loves to do literally everything in front of a camera, would want the nation to see what was going on to bolster his position that he's been unfairly persecuted. But then at the same time, if you see him say not guilty, that is an image for the ages that his opponents would likely try to exploit.
Yeah, indeed it is, John. I thought that the former president looked very somber, very serious when he walked out that door. You know, I think there's no underestimating the significance of what he has just been through. Somebody who has been the president of the United States of America was just fingerprinted and booked and processed to head into a courtroom to be arraigned. I mean, this is a moment that no doubt is having a heavy weight on him. We know from everything he has said he feels unjustly arrested in this case, and he will have his moment to speak. He's going to speak tonight at 8 o'clock from Mar-a-Lago. As Andy McCarthy made clear, he will be released on his own recognizance after this process that's underway now. And we're about to find out the indictments that are part of this case and how many of them are felonies. But I think that the weight of this moment appeared to be on the former president in a very significant way, as we just saw him walk through that hallway, John.
So yeah, I pretty much pre-criticized that clip, but when I was talking about how, he was fingerprinted, booked, processed, and I talked about how he wasn't handcuffed, he wasn't perp walked. Another thing I saw in the live comments here, a question from Caged, did they do DNA? And my understanding from reporting I saw is that's another thing. They didn't do the DNA swab. Although I don't know if they got DNA in the E. Jean Carroll case, where for the rape allegation, there's apparently like a Clintonian blue dress or something like that. But that's something that we're going to look forward to. That's in April. That's this month. They're going to have that civil trial. So that should be interesting. But anyway, like I said, I think that the Fox News people were all ready with Trump's talking points and what he was supposed to say to the cameras. So why did he even have to talk to the cameras if the Fox News hosts were going to just give the talking points to the Fox News audience anyway? Or that's the argument I'm trying to make from those last two clips. And then something that I saw over and over again on Fox News, and I'm going to show you, it started right at the beginning, where they criticized the Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, over and over again for not specifying what the crimes were that were being concealed by the falsification of the business records. And it started right after his news conference where he said over and over again that there was the federal election law. Remember, it's over in the statement of facts that Michael Cohen pled guilty in August 2018 in federal court to these two campaign finance violations that he was directed to perform by Donald Trump, the Stormy Daniels payment and the Karen McDougal payment. So that's something that everyone knew about beforehand. So that's one of the crimes. And Alvin Bragg mentioned it in his news conference. And then there's that New York election law, where it's a crime to conspire to promote the election of any person to a public office by unlawful means. And Alvin Bragg says that really clearly in the news conference. I edited together the parts of the Q&A in his news conference where he made that really clear. And then I cut to the end of the news conference where Neil Cavuto and supposedly straight news reporter David Spunt on Fox News, they pretend they never heard the crimes. And I'm going to show you another clip later from America's Newsroom making the same point with some additional bias. But anyway, here is David Spunt talking about refusing to even hear what Alvin Bragg said. And then at the end of this clip, there's an additional piece of bias that I'll talk about a little more. I think I promised this before. It has to do with the doorman, but the Trump Tower doorman part of the story. But anyway, I'll show you the end of the Alvin Bragg news conference, or the relevant parts of it, where he says what the crimes are that the false business records were supposed to be concealing. Then David Spunt totally not getting it, and then I'll contrast it with the coverage at the exact same time on MSNBC, which was so much better. But anyway, here's the Fox News coverage that I'll talk more with you about after we watch together over here.
Mr. Bragg, the indictment says that there were 34 false business records. And they were done to conceal another crime, but the indictment does not specifically say what those crimes were. We are assuming, perhaps, that they might be election-related. I'm wondering if you can specify what laws were also broken.
Sure. So let me say as an initial matter that the indictment doesn't specify that because the law does not so require. In my remarks, I mentioned a couple of laws, which I will highlight again now. The first is New York State election law, which makes it a crime to conspire to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. I further indicated a number of unlawful means, including more additional false statements, including statements that were planned to be made to tax authorities. I also noted the federal election law cap on contribution limits.
But why weren't there those crimes charged? Why wasn't he charged with those crimes?
Well, I'm not going to go into our deliberative process on what was brought. The charges that were brought were the ones that were brought. The evidence in the law is the basis for those decisions.
Brad, can you please comment on the strength of the evidence that Trump personally intended to violate state election law, including actions that are charged in the indictment?
So the charge is falsifying business records. The charge requires, as I specified, criminal conduct that was concealed. One of the concealed crimes we allege is New York State election law. I went through in our statement of facts, which I think many of you have in front of you, goes through things including, text messages, emails, contemporaneous phone records, multiple witnesses. All of that will be, as you saw in the fall, borne out in a public courtroom in downtown Manhattan.
Our last question is Jonah.
Yeah, Bragg, the charges that are related to the hush money payments to Stormy Daniels, the release from your office, also mentions another woman, Karen McDougal, as well as a doorman. Can you comment on how those players are related to the charges you've brought, or to the case overall?
I'm glad you put your finger on that, because it's not just about one payment. It is 34 business records, 34 false statements in business records that were concealing criminal conduct. And the earlier question about New York State election law, when I talked about conspiracy to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. Those unlawful means, we allege, include the conduct set forth in the statement of facts, which is additional false statements, separate and apart from the charged ones in AMI documents, planned false statements to taxing authorities. It is not just that one $130,000 wire payment. Thanks so much.
Mr. Bragg, can you comment about any incitement of violence by former president?
At what point do you think that that word is necessary?
All right, Alvin Bragg laying out his case that this is different than the case that was rejected by Cyrus Vance, the district attorney of New York before him, and the Federal Election Commission that saw no there and didn't want to pursue this case. He opted otherwise, and hence this 34-count indictment that largely stems from alleged 2016 hush money payments, but there's a lot of duplication here. I want to get into this a little bit more with David Spunt, who I rudely interrupted by going to this presser. Thought it important to do so. But David, looking at these charges, there is a lot of redundancy here, and there's not a lot of whole new here. What are you getting a sense of?
Well, first of all, no problem, because Alvin Bragg is a huge newsmaker today. But Neil, what's curious is that, this specific charge, felony counts for falsifying business records in the first degree, mention, and I'm reading, an intent to commit another crime, though Bragg doesn't say what the other crime is in the 16-page indictment. In fact, as we all just saw there together live, he was asked about that and said the law doesn't require him to say so. So, number one, that is curious that he doesn't get into specifics about covering up or committing potentially a second crime. The other thing that's interesting that you mentioned is, sure, we know about the statements, or the payments rather, to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal. Also a third payment to a former Trump doorman to keep something quiet. It's what Bragg's office calls catch and kill.
Oh, did Alvin Bragg's office come up with the title Catch and Kill, the thing that the National Enquirer was doing for Donald Trump? I heard about that 5 years ago when all of this first started coming out, that the National Enquirer would work for Donald Trump by paying for stories that would be bad for Donald Trump and then not running the stories. So that means they would get a contract with the person so that they couldn't give the story to anybody else, but then they wouldn't tell the story. That's the catch and kill thing. And I don't think that was something Alvin Bragg came up with. And you also saw there that he claimed that we just all watched together live. Alvin Bragg said he didn't have to say what the specific crime was. So that was curious. He should have told us more, but didn't he tell us over and over again that he said there were federal election crimes, there was the New York election crime, and then there was the possible tax crime. And if you look through the statement of facts at the link down in the video description, you'll see that they talk about how the $420,000 that Michael Cohen was given as reimbursement or whatever was characterized as income for federal tax purposes. So, and that could also be, and also New York tax purposes. So those are additional crimes that I'm not giving you citations for, but I already showed you the federal crimes that were being concealed that Michael Cohen pled guilty to, and then the state election crime, the conspiracy to promote the election of a person to public office by unlawful means. And you heard Alvin Bragg explain that pretty clearly, so I don't know why David Spunt didn't hear it, and apparently Neil Cavuto, they were watching the same thing we were watching, and they missed it, I guess. But I will show you at the end an America's Newsroom clip where they make that mistake again, and they downplay a lot of this. Oh, and you saw David Spunt there talk about how the doorman, that was the third piece, that was the third catch and kill story from the doorman, who they wanted to cover up something. He just used the word something, not the probably false story that Trump fathered an illegitimate child. That didn't come out in that report. He did go on to talk about charge stacking, and I saw in the live comments a question from Seal Beater: as a public defender, LiberalViewer, how did you feel when the DA would stack charges on your client? Well, I mean, that is a common thing, that prosecutors will charge things different ways, and try to add on as many charges as possible. Although in this indictment, since the actual crime is falsifying a business record, the 34 charges, and you can see from that chart from Rachel Maddow that there's the 11 falsified invoices, the 12 falsified general ledger entries, and the 11 checks falsely recording hush money payments as a retainer. So there's that is what the crime is. It's making a false business record, and there are 34 different false business records. And I mean, honestly, it doesn't really matter in the end, even if Trump were convicted of all 34 felonies, each of which carry a 4-year prison sentence as the maximum. So that's what, 154 years. Did I do the math right there? Right? 120, no. 34 times 4, so 34 times 4 is 16 and 12, so it's 134 years, sorry. No, 136 years. Excuse me, geez. Having to do math live on camera. So 136 years as the maximum, but the thing is, white-collar crime, the business crimes, most people, even doesn't matter how many felony counts there are, even after trial, there probably won't be any prison time, maybe a small amount of jail time, maybe just probation. It doesn't really matter how many charges they put in there. It's not, it's all going to be part of the same conspiracy. And I think talking about all of the business records individually is important because they're different members of the conspiracy and they're not all involved in each of the acts. Some of those are David Pecker's records. Some of those are Michael Cohen's records. Some of those are Donald Trump / Alan Weisselberg, his CFO at the Trump Organization. So that's one of the reasons it's important to list all 34 different false business records. And I don't think it will really, it's not like they're ever going to go to the 136, right? 34 times 4, I figured it out, 136. 136 years. Trump's not going to get 136 years. I doubt he will get 1 year. Even if he goes to trial and he's convicted, the chances of him getting actual prison time, which is more than a year, if you get less than a year, you serve it in jail. Well, here in California, sometimes you can serve more than a year in jail, but that is going way into the weeds. But anyway, I wanted to answer that question and talk about the number of charges. I mean, I'm definitely willing to entertain bad motives on the part of district attorneys, prosecutors, whatever. I mean, that is the charge about this that I find the most amusing of all from Republicans and Fox News, and you'll see it when I get to the America's Newsroom clip, where they talk about, well, this prosecution is political, it's political. Well, district attorneys almost everywhere in the United States are elected politicians, so they are political. Everything they do is political, and it's especially disturbing to hear, or amusing, ironic, whatever word you want to use, for Fox News to be claiming that district attorneys are political when they are promoting the recall of these so-called progressive Soros-backed DAs because they're soft on crime and they want people to vote them out, or because they're not prosecuting crimes that they want prosecuted. That isn't that political? Like prosecuting the poor people, the black and brown people, the undocumented people, when Fox News is like promoting be tough, hard, put them in, lock them up forever, or well, lock them up. That's the whole other irony, like the lock them up chance for Hillary Clinton all those years. I mean, was that political? I mean, come on. But anyway, I will get to that when I get to the Fox News America's Newsroom clip from this morning that sort of incorporates all the Fox News bias together. But I want to show what they had on MSNBC, which is a former George W. Bush communications director talking to someone George W. Bush appointed to the FBI, that's Nicole Wallace and Andrew Weissman, and they're coming off the exact same Alvin Bragg press conference, but they actually heard what he said, and they give you the good analysis that is sort of the antidote. This is almost the exact same amount of time, well, but it's more analysis from MSNBC because it's the truth, and so I want to give you more of that, because I'm not showing the Alvin Bragg part of what Alvin Bragg said. I'm just showing the end of his news conference and what they cut to on MSNBC that was so much better than Fox News, and I'll talk about it a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Any incitement, violence by former president?
At what point do you think that
We've been listening to District Attorney Alvin Bragg, who has made history today by charging twice impeached ex-president with 34 felony crimes. I want to make sure I understand this. I've got the support system to do just that. What the DA is articulating, that basically it's the cover-up in addition to the crimes that got Donald Trump in so much criminal trouble. That over the course of 2017, and the district attorney made a point of ticking off the months in April, May, June for 9 consecutive months. He made a hush money payment in installments, and that the business records were falsified in each and every instance. There's been a lot of banter, frankly, some of it goes over my head, about what the crime is that beefs this up to a felony. And we got some answers on that, too. There was a violation of election laws. We've talked a lot about the federal laws that we know were violated because the Justice Department, when Donald Trump was president, articulated those. Michael Cohen went to jail for violating those in part. But it turns out Donald Trump also violated New York State election laws. The false records that were made in installments, 9 months, according to Bragg, covered up the crime of defrauding the voters to support a candidate. There are also some language that he shared, Andrew Weissman, about the amount of the wire transfers, tripping Donald Trump up in a criminal way. Talk about the sum and substance of what we understand now that we have heard Alvin Bragg speak.
Sure. So I think I have 3 points to make about that. One is, if you look at the big picture, is what Alvin Bragg is saying is, for a candidate who ran on fake news, and he's the truth teller, this was all about presenting a fake story of who he is to the electorate.
Conspiracy to do that, because he names AMI, he
absolutely
names his fake media allies.
Lawyers, AMI, National Enquirer, with the complicity of the people he was paying off, so that information would not get to the electorate. It reminds me so much, we were sitting here on the first impeachment, where the whole idea was to, again, have a fake story to the electorate. That's sort of the big picture. If you want to know why you should care, that's what's going on. And it happened to trip, as at least according to the charges here, various New York laws. Let me just go to the second point before I get into what are going to be the boring legal weeds, which is that I thought it was really smart of the DA to talk about why this is not selective prosecution. He made a point at the press conference to say, this is something that is charged in New York day in and day out. And he talked about ways in which this sort of felony is charged, not as a misdemeanor, but as a felony for bank secrecy, for sex crimes, for tax crimes, saying this is not out of the ordinary. Yes, is it something where you've seen a former president? Of course not, because when's the last time you had a president commit crimes like this? But it was very smart to help explain to the public why he is not being singled out in terms of what the Manhattan District Attorney Office charges. And then,
I'm sure Fox is leading with it.
Absolutely, of course. And then there's sort of the weeds, which is, as John and I were talking about, when you read the statement of facts and the indictment, you're left a little bit to wonder what precisely is the crime that leads to the sort of bump up? Why is it a felony? And there, Alvin Bragg did give more information. He didn't, he's maybe didn't give the exact sites, but he talked about federal and state election crimes. He talked about state tax crimes. He talked about the furthering the AMI false statements. So that was sort of, to me, that the New York tax and the AMI false statements, those parts seemed very strong to me. The campaign finance issues, whether it's state or federal, there's been a lot of discussion about legal challenges that are potentially available to the former president. But, and he'll make his motions and a judge will decide. But the issue, I think, for Donald Trump, if you are the defense here, is you might sort of pick at the edges and you might be able to do some damage to some of the charges, but it's really hard to see how you're going to have a motion to dismiss that's going to get rid of all of this. I mean, the idea, I think if you're sitting here looking at this, this is going to trial.
One of the questions he faced was about why other.
So, wow, yeah. I mean, I pretty much agree that this case is going to go to trial. The facts are there. Seems like there's evidence to back up the facts alleged in the indictment and the statement of facts. And there are 34 felonies related to these false business entries that were used to conceal or aid multiple different crimes that I've been discussing. And I am going to talk about why the statute of limitations isn't a problem in just a minute, but I have a couple more clips I want to show about the Donald Trump speech from Mar-a-Lago. You know, he didn't speak when he was in the courthouse in New York, but he did have this sort of long, rambling speech that lasted about 25 minutes from Mar-a-Lago. It was around started around 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 5:30 where I am in California. And it was shown in total on Fox News, which, I don't know, is that a good editorial decision? MSNBC decided not to show any of it. They had basically that Rachel Maddow, Chris Hayes, and et al. Discussion that I started my political comedy. I started with my political comedy clip of Rachel Maddow not being able to say David Pecker or whatever, but then in just a minute, the clip after next, CNN made the weirdest editorial decision. But I actually wanted to show you a brief clip from that speech covered on Fox News that makes me think that one of the reasons Trump didn't go to the camera is he is just not doing well. You'll see in this clip, he makes like 2 or 3 mistakes. He has that like breathing problem where he does it like he's like had to take these deep breaths through his nose at some points, and he seemed like pretty low energy. And you'll see at the beginning of this, he has problems pronouncing the word transaction. And then he gets his pronoun, you know, for a leader of the Republican Party who is so concerned about pronouns, he gets his pronouns wrong when he's talking about coming after his family or whatever. And anyway, I'll talk about that 90 or 87-second clip a little more after we watch it together over here.
Letitia James vowed to use every area of the law to, quote, investigate President Trump and his business transactions. Those transactions are going to be investigated, she said, and that of her family and his family, because we're going after his family, and we're going after them hard. This is all before entering office and all before knowing anything at all about me, but you're going to get me. This is why, along with unrelenting crime, so many people and companies are leaving New York. She said that I falsified my financial statements, but in fact, we're proving and will prove that my financial statements were substantially more than we submitted, not less. And in all cases have a strong disclaimer clause in them which tells the institutions that may look at that if they want to, not to rely on the statement. But they've got a problem with their case because, number one, I'm very underleveraged. They can't believe it, all the stuff they read and gave, and have very little debt relative to the value of assets. And importantly, not one bank has lost even $1. She was investigating me to save banks. They have very good lawyers. But they didn't lose $1.
They didn't lose $1. Banks have really good lawyers. That's like one of the worst defenses for bank fraud I've ever heard. Like when because one of the things he supposedly charged, or the Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York, is going after Trump for defrauding banks when he inflated the value of his assets in order to get loans, and then he said they were worth a lot less when he was paying taxes on them. That's one of the other crimes that Trump has gotten away with. That's just a civil case, so he's not being criminally charged with that. But, I mean, that's another reason I don't have a lot of sympathy for Trump in this case, given all the other crimes he's gotten away with. But his defense to that is, we put a disclaimer, it said, don't rely on the statements that we're giving to you now as to how much our buildings are worth. So like somewhere in the fine print, there was like some disclaimer, don't rely on my lies. And therefore he didn't actually lie to the banks. I mean, that's pretty weak, I think. And you saw he couldn't say the word transaction. He tried to get around it by re-saying the word transaction. And then he was trying to say that Letitia James said, go after his family, but he said her family by mistake. And who's the her? There was no her. So yeah, he got the pronouns wrong. And that's like, that should be, he should get canceled in the Republican Party for getting his pronouns wrong anyway, I guess. But so that was from the full coverage of the speech on Tucker Carlson's show. It took up like the last 25 minutes of Tucker Carlson's show, or it went from like 8:30 to 8:55, and they showed it in total on Fox News. They didn't show it at all on MSNBC, although later they showed clips of it and talked about it. But CNN, in their coverage of the indictment and arraignment of Donald Trump, they made the weirdest editorial decision. They showed basically 23 of the 25 minutes, 23 minutes of the 25-minute speech. They like 23 minutes in, all of a sudden they said, we're done. We're not going to show you these last 2 minutes. And here's a clip showing what I'm talking about. Anderson Cooper explains, kind of, over here.
All of those beautiful cities would be standing. Our currency is crashing and will soon no longer.
That's the former president speaking tonight at Mar-a-Lago, back here in New York with the panel. Alyssa, I mean, this is a reprise of. We were waiting for him to talk about what happened today. He finally talked about it a little bit at the end there, and we're cutting out of it. But a reprise of pretty much every grievance. If you were a Republican who cares about the Republican Party and the future of the Republican Party, and you are watching this tonight, realizing this man now may be more powerful in the Republican Party than he was yesterday, or at least a little bit more safe in the Republican Party than he was yesterday, what is going through your mind?
I mean,
And that was a former, I think, communications director at the end of the Trump administration for Trump. The first two people CNN talked to were former Trump officials, which is even like more fair and balanced than what I showed from MSNBC, where they had Nicole Wallace talking to Andrew Weissman, who were both Republican political appointees of George W. Bush. So at least there's that balance. But why did CNN cut away like 23 minutes into a 25-minute speech? Anderson Cooper's explanation didn't really explain it as far as I can tell, but I am going to have one more Fox News bias clip coming up. It's really long. It incorporates like all the Fox News bias, and it has another George W. Bush communication or appointee, Dana Perino, giving some pretty bad spin on the Trump arraignment, and then they like can't they bring on Trey Gowdy. Never mention he's a Republican. They just claim he's a former federal prosecutor, and they all like can't figure out what are the crimes that are being aided and concealed by these false business records. And this is like the next morning. This is this morning. And I'll get to that in a minute. That'll be the final newsmaker clip, although I'm going to show like a short, I'm going to show the Brian Yennis news summary that they didn't even watch in their own clip. But anyway, before I get to that, I did promise I was going to give you my own special theory on why the statute of limitations, which is 5 years on this Class C felony in New York, and a lot of the conduct is like 2016. Most of the payments are in like 2016 before the election. So 2016 plus 5 is 2021. So why has the statute of limitations not run on these felonies? Well, one of the theories I've been talking about for weeks now, and I've seen other people talk about this, is that the statute has been told by Trump being out of the state. And this is not my original analysis. This is, here, for example, is the New York Criminal Procedure Code. What's the... New York Consolidated Criminal Procedure Law, Section 30.10, Sub 4, Sub A. This is the statute of limitations law. And you can see here it says that any period following the commission of the offense during which the defendant was continuously outside of this state or whereabouts were unknown shall not be included in the running of the 5 years, except it can't go for more than an additional 5 years. And we know that Donald Trump was out of the state quite a bit during this period. And there's even this New York, New York case that I put a link down to in the video description, People versus Noble from 1999. And you can see it says here that continuously means that, and this is for non-resident, that you just count up all the days that the non-resident was out of state. It doesn't have to be even if they come back some of the time, you can count up all the days they were out of the state. And from what I understand, it's an open legal question. I'm not licensed to practice in New York, but I understand it's an open legal question in New York as to whether for a resident of New York that all the days they're out of New York can be put together like that. But of course, Donald Trump changed his residency to Florida in September 2019. So at least after that period, he wasn't a resident of New York. So that's the theory that I've been hearing before the arraignment. But one of the things I noticed from the arraignment is they kept talking about a conspiracy, that this was a conspiracy, an illegal conspiracy to influence the 2016 election. In fact, if you look at the transcript from the arraignment, and I put a link down in the video description to a cache of the ABC page that had the transcript on it, and then it disappeared from that page, but it's still in the Google cache. So you can read the whole transcript, and the Assistant District Attorney, Christopher Conroy, he starts off his explanation of the crime saying, defendant Donald Trump falsified New York business records in order to conceal an illegal conspiracy to undermine the integrity of the 2016 presidential election and other violations of election laws. So illegal conspiracy. And that's important because as a criminal defense attorney, I can tell you a conspiracy continues as long as people are committing acts in furtherance of that conspiracy. And in fact, all the acts in furtherance of the conspiracy don't have to be illegal acts. Like, for example, if you have a conspiracy to blow up a federal building, one of the acts in furtherance of the conspiracy could be like going and buying fertilizer. And buying fertilizer isn't illegal, but if it's part of an agreement to commit this illegal act, then it's a conspiracy. It's one of the acts in furtherance of the conspiracy. And the thing is about conspiracies is conspiracies continue as long as people are committing acts in furtherance of the conspiracy. And one of the things I noticed in the statement of facts in this case is some of those acts continue into the last 5 years. You don't even need that whole tolling of the statute while Trump was out of state. For example, here in the statement of facts, the investigation into Lawyer A and defendant's pressure campaign starting April 9th, 2018. Oh, April 9th, 2018. That's less than 5 years ago. Even today on April 5th, 2023, that's within the statute of limitations. They pressured Michael Cohen to flip and not plead guilty and tell the Southern District of New York about all of the crimes he committed and that he was directed to commit by Donald Trump. And then April 21st, Trump commented on Twitter encouraging Lawyer A, Michael Cohen, not to flip. Well, that's an act in furtherance of the conspiracy. It might even be like witness intimidation. That might even be an illegal act in furtherance of the conspiracy. And then in mid-April, he was approached by this other lawyer. I think that's Robert Costello, and giving him back channel communications and all that stuff. And then there are even further acts here in the statement of facts that go all the way through August 2018. After he pled guilty, Trump commented on Twitter, still pressuring Michael Cohen. So that's all the way in August of 2018. That is another act in furtherance of this conspiracy. So that is like an additional theory that the statute of limitations hasn't run that I glean from the fact that they talked about the conspiracy in the transcript right at the beginning of the arraignment. And then, of course, the New York law that they were trying to conceal is any two or more people conspiring to promote the election of any person to public office. So conspiracy is even mentioned in that law. And so these acts in furtherance of the conspiracy that continue into April through August 2018, that means the conspiracy continued all the way into the 5-year statute of limitations period that hasn't even run without counting Donald Trump being out of state. So that was the special legal analysis I came up with on my own that I promised you at the beginning of the video. And now I'm going to play I'm going to show you a brief excerpt of this clip after the clip, just to show you that the commentators, the supposedly straight news anchors, Bill Hemmer and Dana Perino, along with their former federal prosecutor guest, Trey Gowdy, who they don't even mention as a Republican, that they all missed Brian Yennis's news summary that they hide kind of in the middle of this 6-minute clip. It starts off with this total spin from Dana Perino where about the charges against Trump. It's like Trump pled not guilty to charges critics have said are what is it? They emphasize the not guilty, and then they emphasize, critics say is built on a house of cards. That's right. And when I saw that, I was thinking more like taken from the Netflix streaming series House of Cards, but I think House of Cards was an unfortunate use of wording here, and there's all sorts of other bias in here that I didn't even put in the title of this clip. That maybe I'll take a few notes and tell you some more of the bias, but I pretty much pre-criticized the final newsmaker or final Fox News bias clip for tonight that I will talk about a little more after we watch it together over here.
Okay, good morning, everybody. We know the indictment now, and the questions are just piling up. Former President Trump pleads not guilty in a case that critics say is built on a legal house of cards. We're going to go through it now. Good morning, everybody. Guess who's back?
Good morning.
My partner in crime. I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning. Hello to you.
Good morning. I'm Dana Perino. Welcome to America's Newsroom. This is a little bit like riding a bike. I think I can do it.
I think you
have confidence in me.
And so we'll tell people a bit later where you've been, and that's I
look forward to that.
Yeah,
it was pretty neat. Okay, so former President Trump appearing in a Manhattan courthouse yesterday, you saw that. Well, he pleaded not guilty to 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. So that is typically just a misdemeanor. And District Attorney Alvin Bragg's strategy for elevating those charges is on very shaky legal ground, and that is to say the least.
Yeah, so here's the New York Post calling the case trumped up. The paper writes, is that it? Bragg's historic case versus Don falls flat.
Meanwhile, the DA defending his controversial decision to bring the case against a former U.S. president.
Your predecessor took a hard look at this case and decided not to charge it. Federal prosecutors took a hard look at this case and decided not to charge it. Do you believe you have new evidence that led you to decide to charge this, or why now?
We have had available to the office additional evidence that was not in the office's possession prior to my time here. This is the business capital of the world. We regularly do cases involving false business statements. The bedrock, in fact, the basis for business integrity and a well-functioning business marketplace is true and accurate record keeping. That's the charge that's brought here, falsifying New York State business records.
Team Fox coverage, let's get after it now. How strong is the case? Former federal prosecutor Trey Gowdy has analysis. What we begin back at the courthouse, lower Manhattan, back to the Post with Brian Yennis to begin our program today. Brian, good morning.
Bill, good morning. Former President Trump did not say a word to the press in New York yesterday as he made his first court appearance as a criminal defendant. But last night in a speech, the leading Republican presidential candidate attacked the merits of the case and the credibility of the judge.
There's no case. They kept saying there's no case. Virtually everyone, and this is where we are right now. I have a Trump-hating judge with a Trump-hating wife and family whose daughter worked for Kamala Harris and now receives money from the Biden-Harris campaign.
The attack on Justice Juan Merchan came hours after prosecutors in court made issue of Trump's rhetoric and social media posts, concerned it incites violence. A gag order was not requested, but the judge made clear everything is on the table and certain language used was not justified by Trump's frustration, as argued by his lawyers. Now, Trump pleaded not guilty to 34 felony counts of falsifying business records, one charge for each business invoice, ledger, and check. Trump is accused of falsifying between February and December 2017, linked to hush money payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels. Now, in New York State, falsifying business records with the intent to defraud is a felony only if it's proven Trump was trying to conceal another crime. Yesterday, Bragg made the case Trump defrauded voters in the 2016 election by falsifying business records to hide alleged affairs and damaging stories.
New York State election law, which makes it a crime to conspire to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. I further indicated a number of unlawful means, including more additional false statements, including statements that were planned to be made to tax authorities.
Justice Merchan ordered the next court hearing to be December 4th, and he ordered that the former president must be here in person. December 4th is just a month before the Republican primaries.
That's right.
Bill?
We'll see if it happens. Brian, thanks. Brian Yanis, good work. Lower Manhattan. Dana.
Let's bring in Trey Gowdy. Trey, a couple of questions. One on that timing, but also just look at the Wall Street Journal headline, get you to comment on this as well. What's missing in the Trump indictment? For the charges to be felonies, Alvin Bragg needs a second crime. What is that? Can you answer that, or maybe you can't because there is none, and also talk about why December 4th? Why does it have to take that long to get this going?
Yeah, Dana, indictments are not supposed to be mystery novels. They're actually supposed to put you on notice of exactly what the state says you have done. So here we are, 34 counts later, and the three of us certainly don't know what that additional crime is. So there's a legal problem with this indictment, but I think there's also a factual problem. Even if this were just a misdemeanor, you still have to have the intent to defraud, even if it's a misdemeanor. So you have Michael Cohen, who, to quote Dirk Bentley, whom I know you like, Dana, did a little time in the Slammer. You got Michael Cohen, and you got a guy that used to run the National Enquirer. So if you're trying to figure out which Hollywood star had a baby with an alien, he's exactly the right witness. If you're trying to figure out whether Trump did this to protect his presidential bid, or how about to protect his marriage? So you could have Michael Cohen versus Melania Trump in this trial on the facts. So you got the facts, the law, and then the jurisprudence, the equities. It's the wrong prosecutor. I mean, this guy struggles to find something that he thinks is worthy of the full weight of his office. And he really struggles. I mean, he says he's done this in other cases. What are they? Give us the other times that you have prosecuted someone for this dollar amount and this alleged falsification. Yesterday was underwhelming. And that's not just from people that love President Trump. That's people who are agnostic about him and people who aren't that crazy about him. It was just underwhelming.
I tell you, what was the last time you had the Washington Post, Vox?
So, yeah, there were a lot of problems with that America's Newsroom story. First, you saw that Dana Perino. Well, I talked about some of the problems beforehand. That Trump pleads not guilty to charges critics say is built on a legal house of cards. That was actually Bill Hemmer who said that, and then Dana Perino said it's usually misdemeanor. They also used the New York Post as their source. They're always using the New York Post and the Wall Street Journal. I saw Tom Trask in the comments there say, "Good God, Fox referencing another Murdoch property, New York Post, to bolster their dipshit arguments." Yeah, they're always talking about the New York Post and the Wall Street Journal, and they never mention that they're owned by the same company. They actually started talking about that this week when a Wall Street Journal reporter was arrested in Russia, and then all of a sudden, every time they report that, they mention that, that's our sister publication, but never in these situations do they ever mention that. So yeah, that was a point I was going to make, Tom Trask. Thanks for that comment. And you also saw that they talked about how Trump had mentioned the judge's daughter, which is pretty outlandish to go after the judge and his daughter. But they didn't mention how, like, Don Jr. had tweeted a picture of the judge's daughter. They're talking about how the judge's daughter worked for the Kamala Harris campaign or the Biden Harris campaign. Like, that seems like going after a judge's child. Makes me think there might actually be a gag order in this case. And the Brian Yennis report was actually the most factual thing in there. There was some good stuff there, although I did notice he only mentioned Stormy Daniels. He didn't mention Karen McDougal, though there was like this brief reference to, other alleged affairs and other damaging stories. And then Brian Yennis finished his news summary by saying that judge ordered them back on December 4th, very close to the Republican primaries, not mentioning that the Trump lawyers actually wanted them to go longer to like January before they had to come back. Trey Gowdy, I do agree a little bit with Trey Gowdy that, the defendant, as a former public defender, I believe the defendant deserves a bill of particulars that they can probably make a motion for, where for each count, the prosecutor will have to tell them what is the additional crime that the defendant supposedly was trying to aid or conceal. But it's not like that information isn't already available from Alvin Bragg and his press conference. I talked about it. There's the Michael Cohen campaign finance crimes that he pled guilty to in August 2018 and was directed to commit by Donald Trump. That's one of the crimes that these false business records were supposed to cover up. There's the New York election law misdemeanor that these crimes are supposed to cover up, which is promoting the election of a person by unlawful means, which is misdemeanor false statements or whatever business records. So there's plenty of crimes that they couldn't even remember. And the one other thing I wanted to say about Trey Gowdy, like, not only said that he couldn't tell you what the additional crime was that the false business records were aiding or concealing, but the three of us don't even know, even though all three of them watched Brian Yennis's before I get to what Brian Yennis said. Oh, well, I'll do it now. Yeah, Brian Yennis's report actually told them what the additional crimes were. And then Trey Gowdy, Dana Perino, and Bill Hemmer all pretended they didn't know the additional crimes. Here's like 38 seconds of Brian Yennis's report in the last clip that they all ignored even happened over here.
In New York State, falsifying business records with the intent to defraud is a felony only if it's proven Trump was trying to conceal another crime. Yesterday, Bragg made the case Trump defrauded voters in the 2016 election by falsifying business records to hide alleged affairs and damaging stories.
New York State election law, which makes it a crime to conspire to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. I further indicated a number of unlawful means, including more additional false statements, including statements that were planned to be made to tax authorities.
So yeah, it was right there in their own news report. And then the final thing I wanted to criticize, that America's Newsroom report, it had like all the Fox News bias. Trey Gowdy also said, well, he was doing it to for personal reasons, not to aid his campaign, and so this could be a swearing contest between Michael Cohen and Melania Trump. But one of the things I showed you, I didn't put a link to this, Stephanie Winston, who's a friend of Melania Trump's, said I put this tweet up a couple weeks ago, Melania defense and Stormy Daniels hush money case won't work. Why not? Melania Trump knew. And she wrote a whole book about what Melania knew. So that seems like that might be a good rebuttal witness. but also when Michael Cohen pled guilty, in the statement of facts, he swore that it was for the principal purpose of influencing the election, that because he pled guilty to all the elements of the federal crime. And actually, I didn't take a screenshot of it in the statement of facts, but there's one part of the statement of facts that specifically shows that Trump was doing it for the purpose of the election, where he tells Michael Cohen, well, let's try to delay paying Stormy Daniels, because if we can delay the payment and not actually pay her till after the election, then we don't have to pay her at all because it won't matter anymore. That's actually in the statement of facts. Sorry, I don't have that last screenshot, but that is all of my commentary, legal analysis, media criticism that I promised you on Monday. It was historic. I wanted to use whatever expertise I have to try to explain the situation as best I could. I hope you appreciate the time and effort I put into this special live stream. I think, like I said a couple weeks ago, on the first day of spring, that it is spring and the indictments are blooming, and I would expect an indictment of Trump in Georgia probably around May 1st, because that's when the grand jury that does that indicting is supposedly going to expire. There are ways to extend the grand jury, but probably sometime in the next month there's going to be a Georgia indictment, and so I can do some more special live streams. And then Jack Smith, the special counsel, has a lot of evidence about obstruction of justice on the Mar-a-Lago classified documents, so this could become a regular thing. But my regular thing is the Monday Media Mix-Up that I'll keep doing through the 2024 election cycle. So join me, and it's usually like 4 or 5 p.m. Pacific time in the afternoon. Varies a little bit based on my schedule and how much time I have to prepare and whatever. But anyway, thanks for joining me. I appreciate all of my live stream viewers. I even got a super chat contribution early on, so thanks for that. From, wait, where'd it go? I had it here earlier. It's not telling me. Well, I saw that earlier. I'm sorry, I can't. No, it won't show me anymore. That's a bummer. But anyway, thank you, and I'll see you on Monday for my Monday Media Mix-Up, or maybe I'll have some reason to upload something before then. Probably not. But until then, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.